Who was the best 007? 7 men have worn the tuxedo. 7 have ordered their martinis shaken, not stirred. 7 have introduced themselves with those immortal words, Bond, James Bond. But fans argue only one can truly be called the greatest 007 of all time. When Ian Fleming first created James Bond in 1953's Casino Royale, he could never have imagined how this character would evolve through 7 different incarnations over 60 years. The James Bond we met in Dr. No back in 1962 is vastly different from the one who sacrificed everything in No Time to Die. Yet somehow, the essence of 007 remains unchanged. The wit, the danger, the sophistication that makes Bond, well, Bond. For 60 years, James Bond has defined what it means to be the ultimate spy on screen. From David Niven's suave brutality to Daniel Craig's emotional depth, each actor has brought something unique to cinema's most enduring character. But as rumors increase on social media that Aaron Taylor Johnson may reportedly be preparing to become the 8th official Bond, the debate over who wore it best has never been more heated. After all, everyone that has come before has left a mark and set the standard for what the character of 007 should entail. In this video, we will break down one of the most controversial debates in cinema. Who was the best James Bond? Now, this is a very heated topic, because when it comes to 007, everybody has an opinion, and they're usually willing to fight for it. So we've taken time and researched a lot of statistics and fan views to get these reasons and rankings. So now, let's dive in. But a real quick ask that if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, please take a second to hit that subscribe button. One small click for you, but a huge deal for us. Thanks. Number 7. David Niven, the original Bond. Before we dive into the official Eon production Bond actors, we need to acknowledge a fascinating footnote in 007 history. David Niven's turn as Sir James Bond in 1967's Casino Royale. What makes this particularly interesting is that Ian Fleming actually modeled aspects of his literary Bond after Niven, making his casting ironically appropriate. Niven played an elderly, retired version of Bond in what was essentially a spoof of the spy genre. The film itself was a chaotic production that resulted in a psychedelic comedy bearing little resemblance to Fleming's work. However, Niven's sophisticated, debonair take on the character offers us a glimpse of how Fleming originally envisioned Bond. Niven's involvement is that he represents a what-if scenario for the franchise. Had the rights to Bond been different in the early 1960s, we might have seen Niven play a more serious version of 007 instead of Connery, which would have resulted in a very different kind of series altogether. Number 6. George Lazenby. If ever there was a story of what might have been in the Bond franchise, it's George Lazenby. The Australian model-turned-actor had perhaps the hardest job in cinema history, being the first person to replace Sean Connery as 007. And while he only appeared in one film, 1969's On Her Majesty's Secret Service, his impact on the franchise is far more significant than many realize. Let's address the elephant in the room. Yes, Lazenby was wooden in certain scenes. His inexperience as an actor occasionally showed through, particularly in the more dialogue-heavy moments. But here's what's fascinating. When it comes to the physical aspects of Bond, Lazenby brought something entirely new to the role. His background in martial arts and natural athleticism made him the most physically convincing Bond we'd seen up to that point. More importantly, Lazenby's Bond did something revolutionary for the time. He showed vulnerability. His final scene, holding his dead wife Tracy in his arms, remains one of the most powerful moments in the entire franchise. This wasn't the unflappable super spy we'd come to expect. This was a man broken by loss, and Lazenby sold that emotional devastation perfectly. Number 5. Timothy Dalton. If Lazenby was the Bond that could have been, Timothy Dalton was the Bond that arrived too early. When he took over the role in 1987's The Living Daylights, audiences weren't ready for his darker, more serious interpretation of 007. But watching his performances now, it's clear that Dalton was essentially doing Daniel Craig's version of Bond 2 decades before Casino Royale. Dalton's approach was revolutionary for its time. He was the first actor to really dig deep into Fleming's original novels, bringing out the cold-blooded assassin that lurked beneath Bond's suave exterior. His 007 was just there to deliver witty one-liners as a professional killer who happened to work for Her Majesty's government. In License to Kill, his second and final outing, Dalton pushed the character into even darker territory. This was a Bond driven by vengeance, willing to go rogue and break every rule in the book. Sound familiar? It should, because this is exactly the kind of psychological complexity that would later earn Daniel Craig universal acclaim. What held Dalton back wasn't his performance, but rather the productions themselves. The late 1980s were a transitional period for the franchise, struggling to find its footing between Roger Moore's lighter touch and the grittier action movies that were beginning to dominate Hollywood. Dalton's serious approach, while brilliant in hindsight, was simply out of step with what audiences expected from their Bond at the time. Number 4. Roger Moore. When Roger Moore took over the role in 1973's Live and Let Die, he faced an interesting challenge. How do you follow both Connery and Lazenby while making the character your own? Moore's answer was simple but brilliant. Don't try to be either of them. Instead, he crafted a completely different kind of Bond. Moore's 007 was defined by his wit and charm rather than his brutality. His Bond raised an eyebrow more often than he raised fists. Some critics argue this made him a softer Bond, but that misses what Moore brought to the role, a sense of pure entertainment that helped the franchise survive some of its most outlandish moments. Let's be honest, no other Bond could have sold scenes like fighting in space in Moonraker, or swinging through the jungle like Tarzan in Octopussy with such conviction. Moore understood something fundamental about Bond, that sometimes the audience just wants to have fun. However, Moore's tenure wasn't all lightweight fare. In films like For Your Eyes Only, he showed he could handle more serious material when required. There's a scene where his Bond kicks a car off a cliff containing a man who just tried to kill him. The cold determination in Moore's eyes at that moment reminds us that beneath the charm, this was still a licensed killer. The problem with Moore's Bond was that he stayed in the role for perhaps a few films too long. By A View to a Kill in 1985, even Moore admitted he was too old for the part. But his 7-film run gave us some of the most purely entertaining entries in the series. Number 3. Pierce Brosnan. If you were to create the perfect James Bond in a laboratory, you'd probably end up with something very close to Pierce Brosnan. He had Connery's sophistication, Moore's wit, and Dalton's capacity for darkness, all wrapped up in a package that seemed purpose-built for the role. When Brosnan finally got his shot with GoldenEye in 1995, he delivered perhaps the most complete Bond we'd seen up to that point. There was an actor who could deliver a witty one-liner, look completely natural in a tuxedo, and still convince you he could kill someone with his bare hands if necessary. What made Brosnan's Bond particularly interesting was how he adapted the character for the post-Cold War era. His 007 was more self-aware, occasionally questioning his role in the modern world. There's a brilliant moment in GoldenEye where Judi Dench's M calls him a sexist, misogynist dinosaur, a relic of the Cold War. Instead of dismissing the criticism, Brosnan's Bond seems to take it to heart. The tragedy of Brosnan's run is that after GoldenEye, the quality of his films gradually declined. By Die Another Day, the series had descended into self-parody, with invisible cars and ice palaces that even Roger Moore might have found a bit much. But even in these weaker entries, Brosnan's performance remains solid. Number 2. Daniel Craig. When Daniel Craig was announced as the new James Bond in 2005, the backlash was immediate and fierce. Too short, they said. Too blonde, they complained. Not Bond material, they declared. 5 films and 15 years later, those critics could not have been more wrong. What Craig and the producers understood was that Bond needed more than just an update. He needed a complete reinvention. In a post-9/11 world, with the Bourne films redefining spy action, a quip-delivering super spy in a tuxedo simply wouldn't cut it anymore. Craig's Bond was something entirely new, a blunt instrument, as Judi Dench's M so perfectly put it. Here was a Bond who showed the physical and emotional toll of being a government assassin. When this Bond fought, you felt every punch. When he lost someone he loved, you felt that too. What makes Craig's interpretation particularly fascinating is how it evolved over his 5 films. In Casino Royale, we see a raw, newly minted 00 agent, arrogant and reckless. In No Time to Die, we have a battle-worn veteran questioning everything about his life choices. No other actor has been allowed to develop the character so thoroughly over time. The depth that Craig brought to the role cannot be overstated. His Bond was a fully realized character with real psychological complexity. Whether it was his relationship with Vesper Lynd in Casino Royale, his loyalty to M in Skyfall, or his journey toward redemption in No Time to Die, Craig made us care about Bond as a person, not just an action hero. Number 1. Sean Connery. But sometimes the original really is the best. Sean Connery didn't just play James Bond, he defined him. Every actor who followed, even Craig with his radical reinvention, had to contend with the template that Connery established. That's because Connery didn't just act like Bond, he embodied him. What made Connery's Bond so perfect was his ability to balance all the character's contradictions. He could be charming and brutal, sophisticated and ruthless, playful and deadly serious, sometimes all within the same scene. Watch his introduction in Dr. No. The way he delivers that famous line, "Bond, James Bond," tells you everything you need to know about the character. Connery's Bond set the standard for everything that makes 007 unique. The dry wit, the physical presence, the deadly charm, and the hint of cruelty beneath that sophisticated exterior. He could seduce a woman in one scene and coldly dispatch a villain in the next, making both seem equally natural for the character. So, what's your take? Who do you think was the best James Bond? Drop your rankings in the comments below, and don't forget to share your favorite Bond moment. Remember to like and subscribe and stay up to date with related videos. This video was made by movie fans for movie fans.